The palace gardens stretched out like a rainbow made of plants. Flowers from 100 different worlds grew here, each one needing special care. Katie Morrison walked between the rows with a water bottle in her hand. She was careful with every step. The plants were expensive and rare. If she damaged even one, she could lose her job. Katie was 24 years old. She had brown hair that she kept tied back and green eyes that missed nothing. 3 years ago, her whole world changed. The dragons came from the stars. Not real dragons, but aliens who looked like them. They had scales and wings and were much bigger than any human. They conquered Earth in just 8 months. Now Katie worked here far from home. The dragon people called themselves Draconids. They ruled 17 star systems. Their empire was old and powerful. Humans were new to it. Most Draconids saw humans as weak and unimportant. Katie tried not to think about that. She just did her work and stayed quiet. The gardens were actually nice. Katie liked working with the plants. She learned fast. The Venusian orchids were her favorite. They came from Venus before humans changed that planet. These flowers needed exact amounts of water in the air. Too much or too little would kill them. Katie always got it right. Today, the 3 suns of this planet made everything bright and warm. Katie hummed quietly as she checked each plant. She adjusted water levels and removed dead leaves. Everything was peaceful. She wished it could stay that way. Then she heard voices, loud, angry voices. Katie looked up and her heart sank. A group of Draconids was coming down the garden path. In front walked Lord Zethros. Everyone knew him. He was a high noble with green scales that shined like emeralds. He was also known for his bad temper. Katie quickly moved to the side of the path. She bowed her head low. That was the rule. Servants must show respect to nobles, especially human servants. Lord Zethros walked past her. His long robe swept the ground. His friends followed behind him, talking about politics. Katie stayed still and quiet. She would wait until they passed, then go back to work. But as she stepped further aside, her foot caught on something. It was one of the water tubes that fed the orchids. The tube was almost invisible against the ground. Katie stumbled. She reached out to catch herself. Her hand brushed against Lord Zethros' robe. Everything stopped. Lord Zethros froze. He turned slowly to look at Katie. His eyes were like a snake's eyes with thin pupils. Right now, those eyes were full of anger. Katie's mouth went dry. She dropped to her knees immediately. "I'm sorry, my lord. I tripped. I didn't mean to touch you." The noble stared down at her. His friends had gone quiet. Everyone was watching. "You touched me," Lord Zethros said. His voice was quiet but dangerous. "A human touched me. It was an accident, my lord. Please forgive me." Katie kept her head down. Her heart was beating so fast she could hear it. She knew she was in trouble. Touching a noble without permission was a serious offense. For a human to do it was even worse. Lord Zethros raised his clawed hand and struck her across the face. The blow was so hard that Katie fell sideways into the flower bed. Pain exploded through her head. She tasted blood in her mouth. The world spun. "Filthy creature," the noble hissed. "You think you can put your dirty hands on me?" Katie tried to get up. She wanted to apologize again, to make this stop. But before she could move, Lord Zethros kicked her in the side. She heard something crack. Pain like fire shot through her ribs. She couldn't breathe. The noble raised his foot again. Katie curled up, trying to protect herself. This was it. He was going to beat her to death and no one would stop him. That was how things worked. Nobles could do what they wanted to servants. "Enough." The word cut through the air. It wasn't shouted, but everyone heard it clearly. Katie looked up through tears and saw a figure at the garden entrance. It was Emperor Varanthos himself. The emperor was huge even for a Draconid. His scales were gold and seemed to glow in the sunlight. He was old, over 600 years old, but he moved like a young warrior. His wings were folded against his back. His eyes were fixed on Lord Zethros. Everyone in the garden immediately bowed. Even Lord Zethros dropped to one knee. "Your Majesty," the noble said. "This human dared to touch me. I was simply enforcing discipline." The emperor walked forward. Each step was heavy and deliberate. He didn't look at Lord Zethros. He looked at Katie, who was still curled on the ground, bleeding. "Step away from her," the emperor said. Lord Zethros moved back quickly. He looked confused. Emperors didn't usually care about servants getting punished. Emperor Varanthos knelt beside Katie. Up close, he was terrifying. His head was bigger than her whole chest. His teeth could tear her apart. but when he spoke, his voice was gentle. "Can you stand?" Katie tried to answer, but only managed a painful gasp. The Emperor studied her for a moment. Then he did something that made everyone in the garden freeze in shock. He carefully slid one huge hand under her shoulders and another under her knees. He lifted her up, cradling her against his armored chest like she weighed nothing. No one could believe what they were seeing. Emperors didn't touch servants. They especially didn't carry them. The Emperor turned to Lord Zethros. The noble was staring with his mouth open. "You have forgotten something important," Emperor Varanthos said quietly. "Something I learned during the war with the humans." "Your Majesty?" Lord Zethros managed to say. "Humans break easily," the Emperor said. "But they don't break the same way twice, and they remember everything." With that, he carried Katie out of the garden. His stride was long and quick. Courtiers and servants pressed themselves against the walls as he passed. No one had ever seen anything like this. Katie faded in and out of consciousness. The pain in her ribs was terrible, but through the haze she felt the Emperor's scales against her cheek. They were warm and surprisingly smooth. She didn't understand what was happening. Why would the Emperor care about her? They entered a building with white walls. Katie heard the Emperor's voice, commanding and sure. "Healer, she needs immediate help." More voices, confused and worried. Then Katie was being laid down on something soft. Lights appeared above her, too bright to look at. The last thing she heard before darkness took her was the Emperor's voice again. "She will be treated with the same care as any member of my court. That is an order." Then everything went black. Emperor Varanthos carried Katie through the long hallways of the palace. His steps were quick and purposeful. Everyone they passed stared in complete shock. Some servants dropped what they were carrying. Some nobles forgot to bow. They had never seen their emperor carry anyone before, especially not a human servant. Katie was barely conscious in his arms. Her breathing was shallow and painful. Blood from the cut on her head had soaked into her uniform. The emperor held her carefully, making sure not to jostle her broken ribs. They reached the medical wing quickly. The emperor pushed through the doors with his shoulder. The doors were heavy and ornate, but they swung open easily under his strength. "Healer," he commanded. His voice echoed through the pristine hallways. A silver-scaled draconid emerged from an office. This was Zareth, the head physician. He was old and experienced, known for his skill. But right now he looked completely confused. He stared at the human in the Emperor's arms. "Your Majesty," Zareth began. "What? She needs help now," the Emperor interrupted. "Broken ribs. Maybe worse. Head injury, internal bleeding possible." The Emperor walked past the stunned healer toward the emergency treatment rooms. Zareth hurried to follow, gesturing for his medical team. "Sire, the human medical facilities are in the lower levels. She will be treated here," the Emperor said firmly, "with the best care available. The same care you would give to me or any noble." Zareth's jaw hung open for a moment. Then he nodded quickly. "Of course, Your Majesty. As you command." They entered the main treatment room. A medical pod hummed softly, ready for patients. It was designed for draconid bodies, which were much larger than human ones. The Emperor gently placed Katie on the examination table. Under the bright medical lights, her injuries looked even worse. Dark bruises were forming on her face and sides. Zareth immediately began scanning her with medical instruments. His trained eyes took in everything. 2 ribs broken. Mild concussion. Extensive bruising. No internal bleeding detected. She is lucky. Luck had nothing to do with it, the Emperor said coldly. I stopped Lord Zethros before he could finish beating her. The healer glanced up sharply but said nothing. He began adjusting the medical equipment to work on a human body. It was delicate work. Most of the palace technology was made for draconids, not humans. As Zareth worked, Emperor Varanthos stood watching. His golden eyes never left Katie's face. She had gone completely unconscious now. Her breathing was steady but weak. "Why?" Zareth finally asked. He couldn't help his curiosity. "Forgive me for asking, sire, but she is just a human servant. This level of concern is very unusual." The Emperor was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried old memories. "Do you remember the Battle of Terra Nova, Zareth?" "Of course, my lord. The final battle of the human war. I led that battle myself," the Emperor continued. "We had complete control of space. We had overwhelming military power. Their defeat was certain. Anyone could see that. But they fought for 17 days. He paused, his clawed hand resting on the edge of the medical table. Not just their soldiers. Everyone fought. Engineers, doctors, teachers, farmers with mining tools. Even their children found ways to resist us. Zareth listened while his hands continued their work on Katie's injuries. He applied a special compound that would help her bones heal faster. On the last day, the Emperor said, a single human soldier held a critical passage alone for 6 hours. He was young, maybe 20 of their years. He was wounded and exhausted. He had no chance of winning. Any logical being would have run away or surrendered. But he held that position. What happened to him? Zareth asked quietly. We finally captured him. Do you know what he said to us? The Emperor's eyes narrowed. He said, I bought them time. That's what matters. And he smiled when he said it. He knew he was going to die, but he was happy because his team had evacuated thousands of civilians while he held that passage. That is remarkable, Zareth admitted. I pardoned him, gave him a position in my personal guard. His name is Jack Sullivan. He still serves there today. Understanding began to show on the healer's face. You see potential in them. I see what we have lost, the Emperor replied. We Draconids are powerful. We live long lives. We have technology and a vast empire, but we have become too comfortable. We fight wars with fleets and strategy. When was the last time one of us stood alone against impossible odds just to save others? He looked down at Katie, who stirred slightly under the medical treatment. These humans are young as a species. They are weak in many ways, but they have something we lack. They have a fire inside them that doesn't go out, even when all logic says it should. Zareth finished his initial treatment. The medical pod's automated systems took over. She will recover fully in 3 to 4 days. The bone healing will take the longest, but there should be no permanent damage. Good. The Emperor stood to his full height. When she wakes up, inform me immediately. Until then, she is under Imperial protection. Post guards at the door. Imperial guard, sire? For a human servant? The Emperor's eyes flashed. Did I speak unclearly, healer? No, my lord. Of course not. I will arrange it personally. The Emperor moved toward the door but stopped at the entrance. Send for Commander Sullivan. Tell him to meet me in the throne room immediately. The human commander, are you planning something? I am going to call the Imperial Guard, the Emperor said. His voice took on an edge like steel. And I am going to remind my court why that unit exists. After the Emperor left, Zareth stood looking at the unconscious human girl for a long moment. Then he called for 2 members of the Imperial Guard to stand watch outside the room. They arrived quickly, 2 human soldiers in formal uniforms. One was a woman named Lisa Hayes. The other was a man named Greg Marshall. Both were veterans of the war. Both had earned their positions through courage in battle. The Emperor wants constant watch on this patient, Zareth told them. No one enters without his permission or mine. Lisa looked at Katie through the transparent wall of the treatment room. What happened to her? A noble decided to beat her for accidentally touching his robe, Zareth said quietly. The Emperor intervened. Greg's jaw tightened. Which noble? That is for the Emperor to address. Your job is to guard her. The 2 soldiers took their positions without another word. Inside the treatment room, Katie slept on, unaware of the storm that was about to break over the palace. In the throne room, Emperor Varanthos sat waiting. The great crystal walls pulsed with deep red light. Red meant anger. Red meant judgment was coming. The doors opened and Commander Jack Sullivan entered. He was tall for a human, with gray starting to show in his brown hair. Scars marked his face and arms. He wore the uniform of the Imperial Guard with pride. Behind him stood 26 other human soldiers, the rest of his unit. Your Majesty, Jack said, saluting. You summoned us. Yes, Commander. Today in my own palace, one of your people was beaten nearly to death by a noble. Her crime was accidentally brushing his robe while performing her duties. Tell me, what would you have done in my position? Jack's expression hardened. Permission to speak freely, Your Majesty? Granted. I would have delivered justice immediately and publicly, regardless of the noble's rank. But you already know that, sire, so why did you call us here? A slight smile crossed the Emperor's face. Because I intend to make an example, and I want your guard present when I do. The great doors opened again. Lord Zethros entered with his followers. The noble had changed into his finest clothes. His green scales had been polished until they shined. He walked with confidence. He expected a simple meeting, maybe a small punishment at worst. That confidence died when he saw the Imperial Guard assembled before the throne. 27 human soldiers stood in perfect formation. Their weapons were ready. Their eyes were cold and hard. "Your Majesty," Zethros said, bowing deeply, "I come as you commanded." "Lord Zethros," the Emperor said. His voice was formal and cold. "You stand accused of assault with intent to cause serious harm to an Imperial servant. A servant who is performing her duties faithfully. How do you answer this charge?" Zethros's eyes went wide. "Accused? Majesty, there must be some mistake. The human touched me without permission. I was simply enforcing proper discipline. Imperial law allows reasonable correction of servants who fail their duties or show disrespect." The Emperor replied, "This servant did neither. She stumbled on an irrigation tube and accidentally touched your robe. That is not a failure. That is not disrespect. That is an accident. But she is human, Majesty. They are clumsy and inferior. Careful, Lord Zethros." The warning in the Emperor's voice was clear. The crystal walls pulsed brighter red. "You stand before me with 27 humans who have proven themselves in ways you cannot imagine. Do not speak of inferiority in their presence." Zethros looked nervously at the Imperial Guard. Several of the human soldiers were staring at him with expressions that suggested they knew exactly how to kill him in multiple ways. The Emperor stood, his massive form casting a shadow over the noble. "So I will ask you again. Why did you beat her so badly that you broke her ribs and fractured her skull? And this time give me an honest answer." Silence filled the throne room. Zethros opened his mouth several times, but no words came out. Finally, he said quietly, "I was angry, Your Majesty, about losing an..." Emperor Varanthos descended from his throne slowly. Each step echoed through the massive chamber. The crystal walls continued to pulse with angry red light. Lord Zethros stood frozen, watching the Emperor approach with growing fear. "Commander Sullivan," the Emperor said without looking away from the noble, "in human culture, how would such an act be treated?" Jack Sullivan stepped forward. "It depends on the specific culture, Your Majesty. But in most places, striking someone weaker who cannot fight back is considered cowardly. In military contexts, it would result in removal of rank and imprisonment." "Imprisonment," the Emperor repeated thoughtfully. "We Draconids rarely use imprisonment. We prefer exile or execution for serious crimes. But perhaps we should learn from human justice." He stopped directly in front of Lord Zethros. The noble had to crane his neck up to look at the Emperor's face. "Lord Zethros, you are hereby stripped of your position at court. You are stripped of all noble privileges for 1 full year. During that time, you will work in the palace gardens alongside the human servants. You will work under the same conditions they do. You will learn what it means to be considered unimportant. You will learn humility." Zethros's face went pale beneath his green scales. "Majesty, please. A full year of manual labor? I have a family. I have responsibilities. Your family will not suffer. Your estates will continue to be managed. But you will report to the gardens at dawn every day and work until sunset. If you refuse, I will exile you permanently. Consider yourself fortunate. In the old days, I would have simply executed you." The noble bowed deeply. His voice was barely a whisper. "As you command, Your Majesty." "Good. Now leave my sight." Zethros hurried out of the throne room. His followers rushed after him. The doors closed behind them with a heavy boom. The Emperor turned to face the Imperial Guard. "Commander Sullivan, assign guards to watch over Katie Morrison until she has fully recovered. No one disturbs her without my express permission." "Yes, Your Majesty." "May I ask how she is doing?" "The healers say she will recover completely." "But that is not the point, is it?" "No, sire. The point is that someone under your protection was harmed, and you have delivered justice." "Exactly." The Emperor's expression softened slightly. "I want every being in this palace to understand something. Justice in my empire applies equally to everyone. It does not matter what species you are. The humans are here. They are part of this empire now. I will not tolerate them being treated as disposable just because they lost a war." Jack's face remained neutral, but something changed in his eyes. "Your Majesty, speaking for my people, thank you. Do not thank me for doing what any decent ruler should do, Commander. Make sure your people know they can report mistreatment. I want to know if this is happening elsewhere." "I will, sire." The Emperor dismissed the guard and returned to his throne. He sat heavily, suddenly feeling the weight of his 600 years. Change was never easy. His court would resist this. Many nobles believed in Draconid superiority. They would see his actions today as weakness, but Varanthos had lived long enough to see empires rise and fall. He knew that empires that could not adapt would die. The humans had shown him something during the war. They had shown him that strength came in many forms. Sometimes the strongest thing was not to crush the weak, but to lift them up. 3 days passed. Katie woke slowly in the medical room. Her first sensation was the absence of pain. She should be hurting everywhere, but instead she felt only a dull ache. She opened her eyes and saw white walls glowing with soft light. A human guard sat near the door reading something on a tablet. He noticed her movement immediately and stood up. "Easy," he said gently. "You're still healing. I'm Lieutenant Greg Marshall, Imperial Guard. I've been watching over you." "Watching over me?" Katie's voice was rough from disuse. "Why? Where am I?" "You're in the Imperial Medical Wing. The Emperor brought you here himself." Before Katie could process this information, the door opened. Healer Zareth entered, followed by Emperor Varanthos himself.
Katie's eyes went wide.
She tried to sit up and bow, but pain shot through her ribs. "Be still," the Emperor commanded gently. "You are healing. Protocol can wait." Zareth checked the medical displays. "The bone healing has progressed well, Your Majesty. 1 more day and she should be able to walk. Full recovery will take several more days." "Good." The Emperor approached the bed. Katie found herself looking up at a being who could crush her without effort. Yet somehow she was not afraid. "Katie Morrison," the Emperor said. "Do you remember what happened?" "I touched Lord Zethros by accident, Your Majesty. He had the right to discipline me. I should have been more careful." The Emperor's eyes narrowed. "He did not have the right. He attacked you for an innocent mistake. That is not discipline. That is assault." Katie stared at him in confusion. "But I'm just a servant. A human servant." "You are an Imperial servant," the Emperor corrected. "That means you fall under Imperial protection. Your species does not matter." "I don't understand," Katie said quietly. "Why would you care? We lost the war. We're conquered. We're nothing." The Emperor pulled the chair closer to her bed and sat down. This brought him closer to her eye level, though he was still much larger. 3 years ago, he began, I led my fleets against your world. By all calculations, you should have surrendered in a week. Instead, you fought for 8 months. Katie listened, unsure where this was going. During that time, I saw things that changed how I think. I saw doctors continue working under bombardment because they would not abandon their patients. I saw engineers destroy their own research rather than let us take it. I saw soldiers hold impossible positions just to buy time for civilians to escape. The Emperor leaned forward slightly. I saw people who had every reason to give up instead choose to stand together. Your people have a saying, no one gets left behind. Yes, Your Majesty, Katie whispered. It's from our military, but it spread beyond your military. I watched civilian ships return to burning cities to rescue survivors, even though it meant they might be captured. I watched children share their food with strangers. I watched your entire species refuse to betray each other, even when we offered rewards for cooperation. His golden eyes held her gaze. That kind of loyalty, that refusal to abandon your own even when it costs you, that is real strength. Not the strength of weapons or ships, but the strength of character, and it is something we Draconids have forgotten. So you saved me because... Katie trailed off. I saved you because you are under my protection, and I take that seriously, the Emperor said. But also because I meant what I said when your people surrendered. I told your leaders that humanity would be part of my empire, not slaves within it. Those words mean something or they mean nothing. I choose to make them mean something. Tears filled Katie's eyes. 3 years we've been here. Mostly we've been treated like tools or pets. I've seen friends beaten for speaking out of turn. Heard stories of worse. We thought this was how it would always be. It will not, the Emperor said firmly. Lord Zethros has been punished. He will spend a year working beside you in the gardens without his rank or privileges, and I have made it clear to my court that such treatment will not be allowed. You punished a noble for hurting a servant? Katie's voice was full of disbelief. I punished a coward for beating someone who could not defend herself, the Emperor said. His noble blood does not excuse his actions. Lieutenant Marshall spoke from his position by the door. The Emperor has also ordered that any human can report mistreatment directly to the Imperial Guard. We have authority to investigate. Katie looked between them both. Something changed in her expression. It was subtle, but the Emperor recognized it from the war. It was the look of someone who had been preparing to merely survive and had suddenly been given reason to hope. "Thank you, Your Majesty," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You didn't have to do any of this." "I did, actually," the Emperor replied, standing. "An empire that cannot protect its weakest members is not worth ruling. Your people taught me something during the war. You taught me that how we treat those who cannot fight back is the true measure of civilization." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Rest and recover, Katie Morrison.
When you are well, you may return to the gardens if you wish.
Or I can have you assigned elsewhere. The choice is yours." "I'd like to stay in the gardens," Katie said. "I actually enjoy the work." "Then the gardens it shall be. And Katie, if anyone troubles you again, you will report it. That is not a request. It is an order. Understood?" "Yes, Your Majesty." After the Emperor left, Katie lay back against her pillows. Her mind was spinning. Everything she thought she knew about her place in this empire had just changed. Greg Marshall returned to his chair with a small smile. 3 years ago, I tried to kill that man. Held a defensive position against his forces for 6 hours. "What happened?" Katie asked. "He captured me. Instead of executing me, he offered me a position in his personal guard. Said I proved myself worthy. I thought he was crazy." Marshall's smile widened. "Turns out he's the best leader I've ever served." "He means what he says, Katie, all of it." "I think I'm starting to believe that," Katie replied softly. Outside the medical room, word spread through the palace like wildfire. The Emperor had punished a high noble for harming a human servant. 2 weeks after the incident, Katie walked through the palace gardens again. Her ribs had healed completely. The cut on her temple had left a small scar, but healer Zareth said it would fade with time. What would not fade was the change that had swept through the palace. It started small. Human servants who used to walk with their heads down now moved with quiet confidence. Not arrogance, just simple dignity. The knowledge that they could report mistreatment had changed everything. They were no longer completely powerless. Katie noticed other changes too. Some Draconid servants and workers spoke to humans more politely now. Not all of them, but enough to make a difference. Word had spread about what happened to Lord Zethros. Everyone knew that the Emperor was serious about his new rules. On her first day back, Katie arrived at the gardens early. The 3 suns were just rising, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. She breathed in the scent of flowers from 100 worlds. This place felt like home now, more than Earth ever had. Overseer Velros, a Draconid with dark blue scales, greeted her warmly. "Katie Morrison, it is good to see you recovered. We missed your skill with the Venusian orchids." "Thank you, sir. I'm happy to be back." "There is something you should know," Velros said. His expression was difficult to read. "Lord Zethros will be working here. By order of the Emperor. He begins today." Katie nodded slowly. She had known this was coming. "I understand. The Emperor specifically requested that he work alongside you. You are to teach him the care of the plants." A smile tugged at Katie's lips. The Emperor had a sense of justice that was both fair and clever. "I can do that." Lord Zethros arrived an hour later. He wore simple work clothes instead of his noble robes. His green scales looked dull without their usual polish. His head was lowered, not in arrogance but in shame. Velros assigned him to work with Katie on the Venusian orchids. The same plants Katie had been tending when Zethros attacked her. The symbolism was not lost on anyone. "You will follow Katie's instructions exactly," Velros told the former noble. "She is our most skilled handler of these particular plants." Zethros looked at Katie for the first time. She saw shame in his eyes and fear. He probably expected her to take revenge, to be cruel to him as he had been to her. Katie could understand that, but she had no interest in cruelty. "Good morning, Lord Zethros," she said politely. "Let me show you how to care for these orchids." The first few days were awkward. Zethros worked in stiff silence, following Katie's instructions without question. He was clumsy at first. His large, clawed hands were not made for delicate plant work. But Katie was patient. She showed him how to adjust water levels without damaging the sensitive roots. She taught him which leaves to remove and which to leave. She never mentioned the beating. She never threw his crime in his face. She simply treated him as she would any new worker who needed training. By the end of the first week, something unexpected happened. Zethros asked a question. "Why do these orchids need such specific humidity?" he asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. Katie looked up from the plant she was trimming. Because they evolved on Venus before it was terraformed. The atmosphere was dense with acid and crushing pressure. These orchids adapted to absorb moisture directly from the air. Too dry and they starve, too wet and they drown. That is fascinating, Zethros said quietly. I never knew plants could be so complex. All life is complex, Katie replied. Once you start paying attention. It was a small moment, but it marked a change. Over the following days, Zethros began to engage with the work instead of just enduring it. He learned the names of the plants, their histories, what they needed to thrive, and slowly, he began to see the humans around him differently, not as faceless servants, but as individuals with knowledge and skills. One morning, 3 weeks into his service, Zethros spoke more freely. I have been thinking about what the Emperor said. About my ancestors, Katie waited, letting him continue. My great-grandfather was a warrior. He fought in the expansion wars 2 centuries ago. He believed in honor and facing enemies with courage. If he could see me now beating a defenseless person because I was angry about politics, Zethros' voice trailed off. He would be ashamed. What matters is what you do now, Katie said. Not what you did then. Why are you being kind to me? Zethros asked suddenly. I hurt you. I could have killed you. You have every right to hate me. Katie was quiet for a moment, considering her answer. Hating you won't heal my ribs faster. It won't make the plants grow better. It will just make both of us miserable. I would rather spend my energy on something useful. Zethros stared at her. Your people are strange. Maybe. Or maybe we just learned that holding grudges takes too much effort. As weeks turned into months, word of the Emperor's actions spread beyond the palace. In human communities scattered throughout the Empire, people heard stories of justice delivered and protection offered. They heard that the Emperor himself had carried an injured human servant to get medical care. They heard that a high noble was punished for his cruelty. It was not a revolution, but it was something perhaps more important. It was hope. Commander Jack Sullivan met with the Emperor regularly to discuss the new reporting system. We have received over 50 reports of mistreatment in the first month, Your Majesty, he said during one meeting. Most are minor, but several are serious enough to warrant investigation. Investigate all of them, Emperor Varanthos commanded, and make the results public. I want both humans and draconids to understand that this is permanent policy, not a temporary measure. Yes, sire. There has been some resistance from certain noble families. I would be surprised if there was not. The old ways are comfortable. Change threatens comfort, but empires that cannot adapt die, Commander. I have lived long enough to see empires rise and fall. Ours will not fall because we failed to recognize potential in those we conquered. Jack allowed himself a small smile. If I may say so, Your Majesty, you have surprised my people. We expected to be treated as slaves for generations. Instead, you are treating us as equals. Not equals yet, the Emperor corrected. That will take time. But I am treating you as people with value. That your species is different from mine is simply a detail, not a disqualification. In the gardens, Katie and Zethros developed an unlikely friendship. 4 months into his service, the former noble had transformed. He was leaner from physical work. But more importantly, his attitude had changed completely. I never understood why anyone would choose this work, he admitted one day while they planted a new specimen. It seemed beneath notice. But there is peace here, and a complexity I never appreciated. Most people never appreciate things until they have to do them directly, Katie replied. It is easy to overlook what you think is beneath you. Zethros winced at the pointed observation. I deserved that. Maybe, but you are learning. That is what matters. The noble was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I owe you a real apology, Katie Morrison. Not one forced by Imperial decree. What I did was inexcusable. I was angry and cruel, and I took it out on someone innocent. I am truly sorry. Katie studied him carefully. She could see the sincerity in his reptilian eyes. I accept your apology. And I hope when your year is finished, you will remember this time. Remember what it feels like to be considered unimportant. I will, he promised. I swear it. One evening, 6 months after the beating, Katie was summoned to the Emperor's private study. It was a smaller room than the throne room, filled with books and data storage from 1,000 worlds. Emperor Varanthos sat at a desk that seemed too large even for him, reviewing reports. Katie Morrison, he greeted her. I hear you have successfully taught Lord Zethros about plant care. I would not say taught him everything, Your Majesty. but he has learned much. The Emperor's reptilian features arranged into what might have been a smile. Sometimes teaching humility is more important than teaching skills. Please sit. Katie took the offered chair, still somewhat nervous being so close to absolute power. I have a question for you, the Emperor said. You have proven yourself skilled in your work, patient in your teaching, and gracious in your forgiveness. These are rare qualities in any species. Have you ever considered work beyond garden maintenance? What kind of work, Your Majesty? I am establishing a new program, an exchange initiative where humans and draconids work together throughout the Empire, not as servants and masters, but as colleagues. I need administrators for this program, people who understand both perspectives, people who have faced adversity and remained compassionate. Katie's eyes widened. You want me to help run an Imperial program? I want you to help shape how our species integrate, the Emperor corrected. You have demonstrated the qualities such work requires. Of course, if you prefer the gardens, that is acceptable. As I said before, the choice is yours, Katie thought carefully. The gardens were safe and familiar, but this was an opportunity to help her people in ways she had never imagined. I would be honored, Your Majesty, though I hope I could still visit the gardens sometimes. As often as you like, the Emperor assured her. In fact, I think administrators should maintain connections to their previous work. It keeps one grounded. Over the following months, Katie's new role developed. She worked with Draconid administrators, designing programs that would allow humans. 1 year after the beating, Katie stood in the palace gardens watching Lord Zethros complete his final day of service. The former noble looked different now. He was leaner from a year of physical work. His scales had lost their polished shine and taken on a more natural appearance. But the biggest change was in his eyes. They held a wisdom that had not been there before. You survived your punishment, Katie observed as he removed his work gloves for the last time. It stopped being a punishment months ago, Zethros replied honestly. It became an education, one I desperately needed. He paused, then added, I have requested permission to continue working here 1 day each week, even after my noble status is restored. The Emperor approved. Good, Katie said with genuine warmth. The gardens can always use skilled hands, and you have become quite good with the Venusian orchids. I had an excellent teacher, Zethros said with a slight bow, one who showed me more grace than I deserved. That evening, Katie walked through the palace corridors toward her new office. The building that had once seemed cold and hostile now felt different. She passed a classroom where human children were being taught galactic history by a Draconid instructor. Their faces were bright with curiosity and interest. One child, a boy about 9 years old, noticed Katie and waved enthusiastically. She waved back, smiling. In that simple gesture, she saw the future taking shape. A future where a human child could wave at an administrator without fear, where education was available to all, where species was becoming less important than potential. The integration programs Katie helped design were spreading throughout the Empire. Slowly at first, then with gathering momentum, humans and Draconids were working together in ways that seemed impossible just a year ago. There were still problems, still incidents of prejudice and cruelty, but the trend was clear. The Empire was changing. In the human settlements, the mood had shifted dramatically. People who had lived in quiet despair for 3 years now spoke of opportunities. Young humans applied to Imperial academies. Human engineers worked alongside Draconid scientists. Human doctors trained in advanced medical techniques. The barriers were coming down, one brick at a time. Katie's own life had transformed in ways she never imagined. She now attended high-level meetings with Imperial administrators. She advised on policy. Her opinions were not just heard but valued. When she spoke, people listened, regardless of whether they had scales or skin. Commander Jack Sullivan stopped by her office one afternoon. The Emperor wants to see you, he said with a slight smile. He has a proposal. Katie found Emperor Varanthos in his private study, as usual surrounded by reports and documents. He looked up when she entered. Katie Morrison, he greeted her. Your integration programs are succeeding beyond my expectations. The latest reports show a 70% reduction in reported incidents of mistreatment. More importantly, we are seeing voluntary cooperation between humans and Draconids at levels I had hoped for, but not expected so quickly. Thank you, Your Majesty, though the credit belongs to many people, not just me. True leadership is knowing how to build teams, the Emperor said. Which brings me to my proposal. The Diplomatic Academy is beginning a new term. I want you to attend. Katie's eyes widened. The Diplomatic Academy trained future ambassadors and negotiators. It was one of the most prestigious institutions in the Empire. Your Majesty, I am honored. But I have no formal education in diplomacy. You have practical education, the Emperor countered. You turned an enemy into a friend. You faced injustice with dignity rather than bitterness. You built bridges where others saw only divisions. These are the qualities that matter in diplomacy, not memorized protocols. I will do my best not to disappoint you, sire. You could not disappoint me. Katie, you have already proven yourself in the ways that matter most. As Katie left the study, she passed through the great hallway where portraits of past emperors lined the walls. These draconids had built an empire through conquest and strength. They looked stern and unyielding in their paintings. But the current emperor was building something different. He was building an empire through justice and inclusion. History would remember which approach lasted longer. In his throne room, Emperor Varanthos met with his advisors. Some were supportive of the changes. Others remained skeptical. One elderly noble, Lord Drexel, voiced concerns that many shared. Your Majesty, I mean no disrespect, but this rapid integration troubles many of us. The humans have been part of the Empire for only 3 years. Is it wise to elevate them so quickly? Tell me, Lord Drexel, the Emperor replied calmly. How long did it take us to recognize the Selenites as equals after we conquered them? Nearly 50 years, sire. And in those 50 years, how many rebellions did we face? How many resources did we waste on suppression and control? Several rebellions, Your Majesty. The costs were significant, exactly. We spent half a century treating the Selenites as inferior, and they resisted at every opportunity. When we finally granted them equality, the rebellion stopped immediately. They became productive members of the Empire. Some of our finest scientists and artists are now Selenites. The Emperor leaned forward. I learned from that mistake. Why waste 50 years of conflict when we can have cooperation now? The humans have shown they can contribute meaningfully. Why delay acknowledging that reality? Lord Drexel had no answer to that logic. Commander Jack Sullivan gathered his unit for their monthly meeting. The Imperial Guard had grown from 27 members to over 100. Humans from throughout the Empire applied to join, attracted by the honor and responsibility the position represented. We have received 40 new applications this month, Jack told his officers. That is double last month's number. Young humans are seeing the Imperial Guard as a path to respect and advancement. Lieutenant Greg Marshall, who had guarded Katie during her recovery, spoke up. It is not just about advancement, sir. It is about being part of something larger. These recruits want to prove that humans belong here. Then we make sure they succeed, Jack said firmly. Every guard who wears this uniform represents all of humanity. We maintain the highest standards. Lisa Hayes, another senior officer, added, The Emperor is taking a risk on us. We need to prove him right. He has already been proven right, Jack replied. Now we continue to demonstrate why his faith is justified. In the gardens, the night-blooming flowers began to open as darkness fell. Zethros, no longer required to work but choosing to anyway, carefully adjusted the lighting for a bed of luminescent orchids. Beside him worked Peter Chen, a young human who had recently been assigned to the gardens. Why do you still come here? Peter asked curiously. You are a noble again. You could be at court, attending parties, doing noble things. Zethros smiled slightly. I learned something here. Something important. At court, everyone tells you what you want to hear. In the gardens, the plants do not care about your rank. They live or die based on the care you give them. That is honest work. I missed honest work without realizing I'd never done it before. That is a good answer, Peter said. Katie taught me that, and many other things. Zethros looked at the young human.
Do you know what she did when I first came here to work?
After I'd beaten her, broken her ribs? What did she do? She taught me patiently without cruelty or anger. She treated me like a person who could learn and improve, not like a criminal who deserved suffering. That kindness changed me more than any punishment could have. Peter nodded slowly, taking in the lesson. 3 months later, the Diplomatic Academy held its opening ceremony for the new term. Katie stood among 50 other students, most of them draconid but a few from other species. She was one of 3 humans in the class. Emperor Varanthos himself gave the opening address. You stand here to learn the art of diplomacy, But let me tell you what diplomacy truly is. It is not clever words or strategic negotiations, though those have their place. True diplomacy is the ability to see beyond differences to common ground. It is choosing cooperation over conflict. It is building bridges instead of walls. He looked directly at Katie for a moment. Some of you come from species that were once enemies of this empire. That history matters, but it does not define your future. What defines your future is what you choose to do now, in this moment and every moment after. The words resonated with everyone in the hall. They were not just about diplomacy. They were about the kind of empire Varanthos was building. After the ceremony, Katie found herself approached by a young draconid named Selena. You are Katie Morrison, yes? The one who survived Lord Zethros' attack? I am, Katie confirmed carefully, unsure where this was going. I wanted to thank you, Selene said. My younger brother is a servant in a noble house. After what happened to you after the Emperor made his position clear, the treatment of servants improved dramatically. My brother writes that he is no longer afraid every day. You gave hope to many people, human and draconid alike. Katie felt tears pricking her eyes. She had not realized the full impact of that terrible day in the gardens. I just survived. The Emperor is the one who made the real changes. You survived with grace, Selene corrected, and grace is more powerful than anger. That is a lesson worth remembering. In his private chambers that night, Emperor Varanthos reviewed reports.